All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing with Tafseer Surah Al-Araf, but let's just really quick go over some of the things we did last time. We we talked about وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِ وَالَّذِي خَبُثَ لَا يَخْرُجُ إِلَّا نَكِدًا or نَكَدًا. Okay, so we talked about the different qira'at for this one. And we said, وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِ. We said that there is a literal translation, and we said that would basically evolve around the literal meaning of a city or a ground, basically, that is fertile. And when the water that was sent basically from by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically from the clouds that accumulated. And then certainly this water basically pours, and then all the different fruits or all the vegetation basically comes out. And we said that there's that pattern that we see. That we see basically in how the plants grow and how the water would pour, plants grow from underneath, and that's with the same cycle, with the same concept, with the same type of pattern that people would also later grow from the tailbone and eventually basically head after getting resurrected, head towards Yawm al-Qiyamah, or at least the day when they are resurrected and the day that they would be lined up for accountability. And certainly from the ayah وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِ is this a literal translation speaking about that these plants would basically crop if the land is fertile, would crop and bring about fruitful or at least beneficial crops. And if the land was not fertile, that despite all the water that was pouring on it, it would basically only plant perhaps maybe weeds, perhaps maybe just different plants that are not beneficial. At least when we say beneficial, we're talking about maybe good resource of food for human beings, for animals, etc. And certainly كذلك نصرف الآيات لقوم يشكرون, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had let us know that this is how different open book evidences or closed or written book evidences. We're talking about open book, just different signs in nature. Written book, we're talking about revelation. So that takes us to understand the second understanding, which is the metaphorical interpretation with وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِ. If we are to say that this is metaphorical, then in that situation, this is to refer to the heart, the mind, and even the body of a Muslim. If this person had invested in having a pure, non-contaminated heart, a pure mind, a pure body, then they would be easily taking in, absorbing, and certainly taking in the revelation in a way that they're able to see it as a vision, able to see it as an insight through the heart, and able to see it uh, as a as a discipline in the behavior. So we're talking about a vision in the mind, which brings Islam, a vision in the heart, which brings insight and iman, and a vision in the ruh, and certainly which brings in ihsan, and a vision basically in behavior. This is basically talking about salah and piety. So is this metaphorical and therefore letting us see the patterns, just like كذلك right there in the previous ayah, and how it was giving us that comparison? Can we also do the same type of comparison and actually compare the two, that a believer's heart that is not contaminated with sin, or a believer's mind that is not contaminated with perhaps different forms of misconceptions, that they're actually absorbing all of that, and you could see it, then reflecting on their behavior, then reflecting on their heart, then reflecting onto their mind as well, and bring in the Muslim identity or the mu'min identity and the salih behavior and so forth. So كذلك نصرف الآيات لقوم يشكرون يشكرون, if we are to say this is a metaphorical rating, then in that situation we would say كذلك نصرف الآيات لقوم يشكرون, that would also involve speaking to us that one way in recognizing and being able to read or being able to absorb and being able to embrace the dhikr slash the revelation that was sent down, similar to as the water that was sent down that brought about all the vegetation and the fruit and all of that greenery that was necessary for survival. That's the same thing, that the heart itself would be just like that fertile soil. Just by pouring the water in, it's not necessarily going to be bringing in that vegetation and that fruit unless the land itself was fertile, unless the heart itself was fertile, unless the mind itself was ready to grasp this information. And certainly, speaking of all of that, لِقَوْمٍ يَشْكُرُونَ is letting us know, in order to remove these contaminants, whether the contamination in the mind or the contamination in the heart or the contamination in the soul or the contamination on our body, we would basically have to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the first thing is basically to be thankful. One thing to say, that sometimes shukr can actually refer to embracing tawheed. We're going to cover that later on. All right, we're going to cover that later on, but you will see, for example, let me take to Surah Nuh. ما لكم لا ترجون لله وقارا وقد خلقكم أطوارا ألم تروا كيف خلق الله سبع سماوات طباقا وجعل لكم okay, now I stopped at this ayah. عزتين وحشموا ما عرفتش فيه والله عرضت علي يا زلمة. All right, ما لكم لا ترجون لله وقارا okay, sorry about that, but my son distracted me, and now the simplest ayah, I can't even continue it. Okay, and then hold on, let me take you to that one. He distracted me, and now I can't even continue the simple ayah. Okay, let's see. Surah Nuh, right there. Let's go to it really quick, because we're going to be doing in just a bit some more of Surah Nuh. Okay, here we go. ما لكم لا ترجون الله وقارا وقد خلقكم أطوارا ألم تروا كيف خلق الله سبع سماوات طباقا وجعل القمر فيهن نورا وجعل الشمس سراجا والله أنبتكم من الأرض نباتا ثم يعيدكم فيها ويخرجكم إخراجا والله جعل لكم الأرض بساطا لتسلكوا منها سبلا فجاجا. Where's that piece that I wanted us to see? The part, here we go. أنا الله يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم ويؤخركم إلى أجل مسمى. Here we go. فقلت استغفروا ربكم إنه كان غفارا يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا ويمددكم بأموال وبنين ويجعل لكم جنات ويجعل لكم أنهارا ما لكم لا ترجون لله وقارا. Okay, how is that related to any of what we're talking about? When you look at this ayah, فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا, and he had told them to seek forgiveness from the Lord Almighty, for he's the most forgiving, and that with forgiveness you will be having pouring waters of rain, and he will increase your wealth, increase the number of children, and he will give you different gardens and give you flowing rivers. Why don't you turn to your Lord Almighty in submission? What is the correlation with this ayah along with what I was talking about? Let's see. The correlation with this one is that when you look at وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِ والذي خبث لا يخرج إلا نكدا كذلك نصرف الآيات لقوم يشكرون. The part with لقوم يشكرون, it's exactly فقلت استغفر ربكم إنه كان غفارا يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا ويمدكم بأموال وبنين ويجعل لكم جنات ويجعل لكم أنهارا. The correlation is that in order to do That istighfar, you have to first recognize the bounties that you were blessed with. In order to recognize those bounties, you basically have to recognize Tawheed. You have to recognize that it's coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the second that a person thinks that they were the ones that made this possible, whatever blessing that surrounds them, let's say good health, oh, it's because I work out every day. It's because I always eat organic, or etc. Not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed you, but you can be a person that is an athlete, and you can be a person that's eating organic, and you can be just a very healthy person, but still get cancer, for example. So, yes, certainly your workout does invest, and certainly we're seeing numbers of people that are doing, better in probably workout and probably daily activity, or probably maybe less anxiety and probably less in junk food and etc. Definitely having better outcomes, but that doesn't necessarily bring a healthy body. That itself does not necessarily bring a healthy body, but the healthy body is coming from a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's for us to understand that one. And that's the same thing. لِقَوْمِ يَشْكُرُونَ. الشُّكر can also mean for people to embrace and recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once they recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala slash tawheed, that's when they'll be capable of recognizing the bounties. That's when they'll be recognizing basically the blessing coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why I correlated it with the ayat in Surah Nuh, فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا. And I had said that is Prophet Nuh عليه salam, and I had said, seek forgiveness from your Lord Almighty, for He is the all-forgiving. يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا. And He will send the skies with pouring rain, basically. Okay? Pouring rain is supposed to let us understand what? Pouring rain is also to let us know that that's what would bring the vegetation and greenery and water basically brings more life and certainly more resources for existence. And more resources for existence actually means a better outcome of healthy living, better outcome of perhaps having these resources to give you more children, to give you better health, to give you more resources to keep you going, longer life, and certainly better wealth. Okay, now let's continue right there with لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَى قَوْمِهِ فَقَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُمْ مِنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ إِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ. Let me first screw, let's see, right there. Hold on. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to scroll right there and we're going to zoom really quick. Okay. It would be a good idea to actually do a really fast translation for those ayat before we actually jump into further tafsir. And let's see the questions that we're going to be answering really quick. Okay, so let's say لقد أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه فقال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره. Let's say right there. لقد أرسلنا. Indeed, we sent Nuh to his people. He said, O my people, worship Allah. You have no other God but Him. I truly fear for your torment of a tremendous day. Let's see. Sahih International, what did they call it? Tremendous day. Okay, you can see Mustafa Khattab, definitely benefited from Sahih International. Okay, let's see al-Mawdudi. We sent forth Nuh to his people, and he said, O my people, serve Allah. You have no other God than Him. So he said, for the word u'budu, he said, serve. Indeed, I fear for you the chastisement of an awesome day. Okay. Let's see this one. I fear for you the punishment of a dreadful day. That's Yusuf Ali. Let's see if I were to translate this, a fast translation. We had sent on to Nuh to his people. And then this is a semicolon right there. Okay, semicolon, let's put it right there. فَقَالَ يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره. And I had said, O my people, worship the Lord or worship Allah. You have no other deity but Him. I fear a day of torment on a magnificent day. That's how I would translate it. Let me explain why I would translate it this way. We had sent the word arsala, basically to send someone, and Nuh to his people, because the qawm actually means the group of people. In the pronoun ha is to his, basically people. And then he said, worship Allah, the God. You have no other deity, because it didn't say Lord, but it said deity other than Him. I fear for you for a torment, a magnificent torment. Well, basically a torment on a magnificent day. Magnificent, is that supposed to mean magnificent that it is giving me a connotation of good? No. But azim is supposed to give me a connotation that there's something big, tremendous, basically happening. That it's not awesome. I would say an awesome day, that is giving me a connotation that something good and rewarding is happening. But azim is not necessarily giving me a connotation of something that is rewarding, more than that it is something that is a great day, or a day of perhaps something that is tremendous happening than any other way. So it's just telling me that there's something tremendous happening, something great that is happening, something very dangerous that is happening. قال الملأ من قومه إنا لنراك في ضلال مبين. And basically, let's see here, it says, but the chiefs of his people said, we surely see that you are clearly misguided. Let's see. The eminent among his people, in Sahih International, indeed, we see you in clear error. Okay, let's see, Al-Hilali. The leaders of his people said, verily, we see you in plain error. The leading men, so you can see leaders, leading men, eminent of his people and eminent people, the chiefs, leading men of his people replied, we see that you're palpable error. You're in palpable error. Let's see, Yusuf Ali. We see thee evidently wandering in mind. That's way off. Okay, well, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say way off. Okay, let's see the surface translation. قال الملأ من قومه. The word al-mala actually means certain people that are considered of high importance, leading figures, influencers, chiefs, people that are leaders within a society. That's al-mala. Al-mala is basically the leading figures within the society. Whether you call them stars, you call them actors, politicians, the businessmen, the rich people, the influencers. So those are al-mala, the leading figures within the society that people would follow. And you want to keep this one in mind, that this word appeared very many times in the Quran. I should probably do just a fast right there, probably research it really quick on my phone. I'm just going to go and actually see how many times did we actually have the word al-mala appear in the Quran. I'm just going right there. It's called Quran Majid, and I'm going to say exact. Okay, and it appeared 17 times according to my, at least my app and in all routes 40 times, but in the exact occurrences, it appeared 17 times. Regardless, so when you look at al-mala, that's to let us know that many times people, you can classify them as in two. There are the general population, and there are those chieftains or these people in influence that basically lead the masses. The chieftains that lead the masses, people usually would think that they are the people that found the keys to success. So they would follow them, whether they're people that are considered businessmen or whether they're people that are considered scientists or probably maybe, something that people would see in them as uh, people that they should be following, probably political power or anything of that sort. So when you look at il-mala, you're basically seeing an inference within that ayah that these people had great influence on the society, that these people basically were the figures that the majority had and the masses had basically taken them as their area of influence, and they followed them like they were the ones that have the key to success. So think of it as this way, that they had seen in them as the ones to lead the society to success. What does that remind us of? That reminds us of the Pharaoh, Pharaoh. What did he do? He basically said, إني أخاف أن يبدل دينكم أو أن يظهر في الأرض الفساد. He was talking about Prophet Musa عليه السلام. He said, I fear that he will change your religion, or he will perhaps bring about within the society, bring about corruption. And why did he say, إني أخاف أن يبدل دينكم? Because they were presenting, or he was also presenting, and the society was living that building pyramids and celebrating, or perhaps maybe worshiping the Pharaoh himself, that's what is going to bring them, one, religious salvation, two, the salvation or probably the resources and successes within life. And that's the same thing when you're talking about each and every single philosophy, each and every single, whether it was called a political philosophy or a political organization, or whether you're talking about maybe just a general cultural philosophy. You look at during our times, the modern kufr is basically postmodernism. And postmodernism likes to present itself, and who's presenting it? Well, al-mala. What do you mean by al-mala? Whether you're talking about influencers, stars, or probably people of money or Epstein people, and or probably uh, the businessmen, etc., they would be the ones to control the media. They would be the ones to control the education system. They would be the ones to control the economical system. And then, of course, certainly they would be the ones to be seen by the masses, by the people, that they are the ones that figured out what it means to be successful. So during our times, the presentation that we would see in the media or perhaps in school, that if you are following religion, for example, that you are backward. If you are following religion, regardless of what religion that is, that somehow you are too traditional and not smart enough as an atheist. And certainly that's another thing that they would want to present, is that an atheist actually means that this person is smart. That's more of a stereotypical image that was also part of the play of the modern mala, wanting to present an atheist is smart, a religious person is stupid, a person that is practicing the religion is traditional, is a person of extremism, is a person of backwardness, is a person that is not open-minded. So using all these terms to make the person lack confidence, to question the confidence in their resources, and also feel confident in the resources of probably an atheist, or the resources of a liberal person, or the resources and the presentation of a person that is perhaps distant from religion, that these people are open-minded, that these people are basically smart, intelligent, the best etiquette. These people are inclusive. These people are tolerant. These people are fun to be around, versus a religious person. They're boring to be around. They're basically extreme. They're the ones to be a threat to the society. They're the ones to basically be too traditional. They're the ones to be too close-minded, and the list goes on and on. So you're seeing a certain media game that is run by al-Mala. And that's the same thing that actually happened not only during Prophet Noah, but during all prophets. And that's one thing that you will see in Surah Al-Araf, focusing on such a presentation, the impact al-Mala, the impact on such figures, in the impact that they would have on the society, in shaping a narrative, in affecting the masses, in what decisions and how to perceive basically the message, how to perceive the prophet, how to define truth, and all of that is basically within all the different stories that we're going to be seeing, that it was actually shaped by al-Mala. Al-Mala said, the masses absorbed, the masses embraced, the masses basically repeated a certain narrative. And then the question is, how did these prophets respond? Or did they not respond? Or did they basically do something else? Were they necessarily successful in presenting that presentation that wanted to refute basically all the wrong narrative that al-Mala was presenting? What happened then? Why are we even mentioning these stories? Why are the ayat even mentioning such stories? I mean, aren't they supposed to be history? No, those stories are not history. Those stories are to let you know how, one, the story started in the story of Tawheed or the story of deviation. Because if you know the story of deviation, then you need to also know the story of Tawheed. There's no way to know the story of Tawheed unless you recognize also the story of deviation. The story of Iman is the same story basically the other side of the story of Kufr. In order for you to understand what truth is, you have to basically compare it to falsehood. And if you don't recognize falsehood, then you're not going to be capable of recognizing truth. Give me a second. Sorry about that, but they actually have these pest controls in Malaysia, and these pest controls, they would, I don't know, fill the place with smoke and very strong chemicals that fills the air, and it becomes very, very irritating to smell. Okay. So when you look at قال الملأ من قومه إنا لنراك في ضلال مبين, I think another part when we understand these stories is that we're supposed to see that the story isn't history, but the story repeats itself. Within your times, you're going to see the same pattern. You're going to see the same paradigm. You're going to see the same story repeating itself. And then therefore, you would ask yourself, where am I in this story? Am I basically a person that is controlled by al-mala, whether that was a social media influencer, whether that was a rich person, or whether that was a politician or who's controlling my mind, or whether that's a university professor. And what many times I would always say is that students don't recognize that these professors are not necessarily just academic professors, but at many times they are selected, and that there's an agenda on who passes, what is being taught, and at many times it's not necessarily what science and what studies are showing, but many times it's basically a certain agenda that wanted to pass on a certain impression, a certain research, a certain idea, and then would select which of that research is going to make it based on what agenda, what impression, what type of a behavior, what type of an interpretation do we want spreading within the society. And this is very important to keep in mind, that a lot of times those that would be subsidizing a lot of these research papers, a lot of times it is subsidized by certain groups of people, political groups, or probably even philosophical groups, whatever groups. In 95% of the time, the study, quote unquote, is going to be in support of whoever subsidized the study. In other words, the study isn't necessarily as what you would think of it as an unbiased study, but many times it is actually part of an agenda. So Islam comes in to let us know that in order for you to be free from the influence of al-mala, in order for you to be free from the influence of deviation, from the influence of what shaitan will probably play through these mouthpieces, through these people that have the big pockets, and through these people that probably have many viewers and many followers, that's not what you need to be following, and that you need to be free from all these influences. And that's what it means to be Muslim. What it means to be Muslim is to be free from such influences and to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not submit to the impact of many of these influencers, and many of these chieftains, or probably these people within the society, probably taking the lead and affecting you without you realizing. So in other words, what stance do you take as a Muslim that is following the steps of of Prophet Nuh, or probably Prophet Hud, or probably Prophet Salih, etc. So the stories you would see coming in with the same pattern to tell us that the pattern is the same from the time of Prophet Nuh to the later Prophet Hud to later Prophet Salih to later Prophet Shu'aib, the list goes on and on. The story is the same. You have a certain group of influencers that would shape the views, that would shape the behavior, that would shape the judgment, and how the narrative is basically presented within that society. And then many people would absorb it as this is a fact. And without them realizing that truth doesn't depend on the number of followers, and certainly truth doesn't depend on the narrative presented, but it actually depends on, one, the resource, two, on we're talking about the resource, and also the presentation itself, and how the prophets themselves were presenting that information to the people with whatever truth it contains within it. Okay, so when you look at قال الملأ من قومه إنا لنراك في ضلال مبين, and what happened? Well, the people, those mala, basically the chieftains, or these eminent figures in his people, or the eminent among the people, or the leaders, or the leading men, or these chiefs of people, they basically had said, إنا لنراك في ضلال مبين, we see you in magnificent deviation. So the question is, why did they say magnificent deviation? Why not say something like what right there in the story of Prophet Hud, they basically said, "Inna lanaraka fi safaha." In the other stories, they basically had said either had used a different term, probably called him Majnoon, probably called him a lunatic, or probably called, we're going to see the different patterns. In other words, there's always going to be a way to present a stereotypical image, a narrative, in order to control the masses. And certainly that will be heard by the majority of the people, and that will be repeated within the society until it becomes a fact, at least in people's brains. It becomes a fact in people's brains. It becomes the delusion that people will embrace as if it was a fact. And I want you to look at this one. إِنَّا لَنَرَاكَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. We see you in here. The word dalal, let me just explain the word dalal. The word dalal actually means deviation. So if I were to use the word dalal, or at least they were using the word dalal, that would actually mean that they had a certain reference that they considered that that was right. There's a certain reference that they considered was the area that they were supposed to embrace as truth. They had a certain area that basically told them that that was the area of guidance, that that was the area that helped them get to success. So when they said, "Inna lanaraka fi dalalin mubin," they were definitely seeing that he was going into a completely different path than the path that they were living in. What was that path? Let's move on to see what was the path that would give me more details to see what referencing did they depend on. What was the society? Why did they say dalal and not call him a lunatic, for example? Why did they not call him a magician, just like how they called Prophet Musa alayhi salam? Why dalal? And that's why, let's see right there and see how the society of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was like. قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ لَيْسَ بِي ضَلَالَةٌ. Said, "O my people, I do not have any deviation. وَلَكِنِّي رَسُولٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. But I'm a prophet of the Lord of the worlds." So did he actually respond to them? Did he say, "Laysa bi dalala," and here's the evidence that I'm basically not deviant? One, two, three, evidence. Did he respond to them? No, he did not. And this is very important to keep in mind. Not every single narrative that is what is basically an ad hominem. They will attack you personally, not attack the argument. In other words, not necessarily bring about the rebuttals against the argument, but they'll basically start attacking you personally and not basically discuss the argument. Did Prophet Nuh alayhi salam invest his time and say, "Well, here's how your personal attack on me doesn't make sense, and here's one, two, three, four, five, six rebuttals"? Did he actually do that? No, he didn't. He just went straight to the presentation and said, "وَلَكِنِّي رَسُولٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ." But I'm a prophet sent from the Lord of the worlds. What is that? That basically lets us know that the prophet recognized that whatever presentation, stereotypical image that they were presenting was more of smoke in the faces, in the eyes of the masses, in order to delude the masses, to get them away from seeing truth, to get them away from recognizing what he is presenting. What was Prophet Nuh alayhi salam presenting? Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was presenting that he is basically a prophet from the Lord Almighty, and that what they are attacking was basically himself. They're attacking him because they recognize that what he is coming with is أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي. I'm here to basically give you that resource of information, the presentation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had asked me to basically deliver. Okay, so in other words, he was letting them know that there is a substance, there is this presentation, there's a message, and that message is what is your objection on it? Did they object the message? They couldn't actually find anything to object onto the message, but they started attacking him personally instead and said, well, you know what? You're deviant anyways. There's something wrong with you. Why did they consider that there was something wrong with him? Because they considered that there is a certain norm that he was supposed to be embracing. Just by going away from the norm that they were living their life based on, what was the norm? What were they doing? The norm that they were living in was basically worshiping, as we would see in Surah Nuh. We need to go to Surah Nuh once again. So let's go to Surah Nuh once again in order to see that piece of, let's call it the norm that they were practicing, in order to understand what norm were they really asking him to follow. That's very important to understand in order to see that epistemology that they were dependent on and what they considered as that was the area of truth that he was supposed to be, according to them, basically following. Hold on, let me just go to Surah Nuh really quick. Okay, so Jinn and Nuh right there. Hold on. Jinn and Nuh is right after. Here we go. So what were they following? Let's see really quick. Hold on. Okay, let's see. And Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, let's see, right there. So Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was coming to them and saying, أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاتَّقُوهُ وَأَطِيعُونَ, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was the first thing. What were they worshiping though? So قَالَ, let's see, right there. What were they worshiping? And وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا كُبَّارًا. Okay, so they basically did a lot of plots in order to delude the masses. وَقَالُوا لَا تَذَرُنَّ آلِهَتَكُمْ وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ وَدًّا وَلَا سُوَاعًا وَلَا يَغُوثَ وَيَعُوقَ وَنَسْرًا. Okay, this is the norm that they were embracing. So what did they say? That was their determination. They said, لا تذرن, do not leave your deities, and do not leave ودا ولا سواعا ولا يغوث ويعوق ونسرا. So those were basically different idols that they worshipped. All those names, the Wad, the Suwa', the Yaghuth, the Ya'uq, and the Nasra, they're basically just different idols that they basically had worshipped. Those were those idols that they worshipped. So you could see that they basically made their own presentation of what they considered was resembling God, and that anybody that did not embrace this God that they had considered that was a good resemblance of God was considered as a person that was being deviant. They were lost in understanding the narrative. They were lost in understanding truth. They were lost in understanding where they should basically head to, understanding life, understanding the purpose of life, and so forth. They considered that what you were supposed to be doing, or what Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was supposed to be doing, according to them, was turn to these idols in one, reference to truth, two, reference to legislation, three, in worship. So that was their presentation, and that's why they considered Prophet Nuh alayhi salam as deviant, because they considered that he was coming in with the wrong religion, with the wrong resource. I want you to look at this one. When you're talking about wrong resource, this is extremely important, because Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was making it clear that he himself, as a prophet from the Lord Almighty, that the resource was actually Allah Almighty, and not whatever gurus or priests or whatever, those idol, perhaps maybe those priests and monks and whatever, they were probably the ones to speak on behalf of those idols, because certainly the idols did not speak. And then those priests would then be the ones to be the spokespeople, to be on behalf of those idols and present that that's what God wants. And then certainly Prophet Nuh alayhi salam wasn't going to let their smoke come into the way. And that's why Prophet Nuh alayhi salam basically came in to say, وَلَكِنِّي رَسُولٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي. I'm a prophet from the Lord Almighty, coming in to deliver the message from the Lord Almighty. So what was he emphasizing on? He was emphasizing that I am the center as a prophet, but not because of who I am, but because I'm carrying a message from the Lord Almighty. What is that message? That message that we're supposed to turn to the Lord Almighty in worship. فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا. In other words, to turn to the Lord Almighty in worship and not confuse our compass in worship something else. So let's continue right there. وَأَنصَحُ لَكُمْ وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Let's see right there. He replied, O my people, I'm not misguided, but I'm a messenger of the Lord of all worlds. But the question is, مِن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. He didn't actually say, I'm a messenger from the Lord of all. Oh, yes, he did. Okay. So he didn't say that he was a messenger to all the worlds, but he said he was a messenger from the Lord of the worlds. And let's see. He said, the error is not in me, but I'm a messenger from the Lord of the worlds. There's no error in me, but I'm a messenger from the Lord of worlds, mankind, jinn, and all that exists. There's no error in me, but I'm a messenger from the Lord of the universe. And here, no wandering is there in my mind. On the contrary, I'm a messenger from the Lord and cherisher of the worlds. On the contrary, that doesn't actually say that. I know he probably would want to say, well, I mean, yes, you can if you were to use ولكني as an objection. In Lugha Arabiya, yes, the word ولكني can also carry the inference within it. ولكني as an objection, and as a presentation, or in other words, objection to what you're saying, and the presentation that I will be affirming is such and such. Okay, so yes, certainly what the word ولكني. So it's quite interesting that Yusuf Ali was the only one that used on the contrary in here, which indeed ولكني can carry that in Lugha Arabiya. Okay, he's the only one that used it. Okay, let's see right there. ولكني رسول من رب العالمين. Conveying to you my Lord's messages and giving you sincere advice. And I know from Allah what you do not know. Okay, so they all pretty much translated it. I am but fulfilled towards you the duties of my Lord's mission. Sincere is my advice to you, and I am from Allah, something that ye know not. It's a little, I guess, كالكعها زيادة. Okay, let's move on right there. أبلغكم رسالات ربي. So why did he say وَأَنصَحُ لَكُمْ? Let's look into this one. The word أنصح, okay, we're going to get in details with Tafseer Al-Qurtubi, but just wanted to give you kind of like a fast couple notes right there. So he was saying that he was doing two things. Number one, أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي. That was the first thing. I'm delivering the message of the messages, actually, since this is plural right there. رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي, the messages of my Lord. Why did he say my Lord and not God? رِسَالَاتِ اللَّهِ, my Lord. Why? Because he wanted to present to them that he too was submitting to the message, and that the reference is not really necessarily evolved around him, but is actually evolving around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? That's the key thing, that it's evolving. Even the Prophet when he used to do tashahhud, he used to say, وَأَشْهَدُ أَنِّي مُحَمَّدٌ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, or وَأَشْهَدُ أَنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. He would actually say that this way, that I bear witness that I'm a prophet of Allah. That's the Prophet saying as well. وَأَنصَحُ لَكُمْ. That's two messages right there. So number one, he was delivering the message. Number two, أَنصَحُ لَكُمْ. What is أنصح anyways? In nasiha actually means to bring a pure presentation. So if you are to say in nusх, the etymology of it, it basically means to give pure honey, okay? Away from all the different things that probably will be from the crust and from all of that, from all of those, the honeycomb. So you're getting the pure honey away from all that honeycomb that might actually be in there. Okay, وَأَنصَحُ لَكُمْ. And I'm just giving you the pure message. Well, wait a minute, can the message actually not be pure? And then something purifies it? Like, how do you actually put these pieces together? No, the message itself is pure, and that in order to live away from all the different contaminants that may surround your life, whether we're speaking about misconceptions or we're talking about shubuhat or shahawat, misconceptions or lust, that Islam or the Risala itself was in order to give you a life of purity, a life away from all those contaminants, away from all the different misconceptions, a life and a message away from all the confusion, basically. So what ansahu lakum, this is very important to talk about, that when you want to make da'wah, certainly there's the hidayat irshad, and there's the hidayat tawfiq. And the part of hidayat irshad is that you present the ilm of it. But by presenting the ilm, that's not enough. Presenting the ilm is not enough. You basically also want to give that close hidayah and actually give that guidance to help them understand how to implement the ilm in life. It's not enough to give the theory of it, but you also have to present the ilm and how we put it into practice and hands-on. So when you say وَأَنصَحُ لَكُمْ, it's to give the advice, to give, let's say, a clear presentation away from any of those confusions. So in the beginning, it was giving you the ilm of it. أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَةَ رَبِّي. But then the second piece of it that Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was presenting to help you understand how to apply basically the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into real life, and how, and this one, وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, and how this, well, literally it means, and I know from Allah what you do not know. Okay. But if you were to put these three areas together in understanding the ilm itself, and or the ilm itself and how you put it into these three categories. Number one, there's the theory of the ilm, where it's coming from, what it contains. There's the application of it, and there's also the purpose. the implication of this ilm and where it's going. And that requires an extra level of ilm, fiqh. Let me give you an example in the sciences of Islam in the sciences of Islam and how we understand this. So أبلغكم رسالات ربي, it's probably, hey, you're getting the theory of, let's say tafsir. You're understanding tafsir. You are taking the time to scrutinize the words, to learn the meanings, to look at the vocabulary of it, and probably the nahu, probably the grammar, think of it as dissecting, each and every single element within these words. Then ansahu lakum, that would be to study how we would apply it, the fiqh of it. Okay, how do I understand tawheed and put it into practice? How do I absorb all of that? How do I absorb ibadah? Okay, so I'm praying. You asked me to pray. You said I'm not supposed to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm supposed to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm supposed to be learning how to focus all of that. Now, ansahu lakum comes in as, well, how do I put that discipline into practice, into my daily life? How do I embrace it as something that corrects and takes out all the contaminants that would probably affect how I absorb this piece of information? And that's that training piece of it. In other words, when we speak of ilm, you can talk about ilm and the person can probably memorize the Quran and probably know all the tafsir and probably know all of that. But just by knowing the ilm of it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is putting it into practice. So we have to put in this discipline. There's some ilm that you would get through studying. You go to school, you study, you attend halaqas, you learn all of that. That's one area. That's taking the theory and trying to absorb the theory of it. But there's another type of ilm that needs discipline, that needs practice, that needs a certain amount of hands-on. If, for example, sisters, I tried hijab, it wasn't for me. Wait a minute, they're hands-on. Hijab is not just some kind of a covering that you would put over your body, but did you practice the akhlaq of it? Did you practice the spirituality of how and what it means to put on hijab? Did you practice all that area? There's no way that you can get to that level of iman unless you put in the level of certain level of discipline in that وَأَنصَحُ لَكُمْ. You put it into practice. It's in that experience, into that discipline to make you live basically that iman as a practice and as an inner achievement. Okay, let's see. وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. That's a higher level. I know from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what you do not know. So this is the theory of the ilm. This is the discipline of ilm. And this one is what? This is a higher level of ilm. And that's more of ijtihad. Those mujtahideen would be the ones after taking the ilm and then discipline yourself into the ilm, and then that person will basically start growing into seeing different areas of that implication of ilm and start basically being capable of understanding what we need to know and how we need to get to the purpose. The legal maxims of the ilm is another level. What does that mean? So we look at many times, we would say that the society, we're teaching Islam. We're teaching Islam and the theory of Islam and all of these different things. And then there's the discipline. But then there's one side. We see that often in the society. They'll tell you, we learned Islam better than our grandmothers. I'll say, sorry, wrong. There's no way. You know why? Number one, the Prophet ﷺ had foretold us that the later generations, do not actually have, but after the Prophet ﷺ, that is, okay, do not have a better relationship with their Islam than the previous generations. Certainly, بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا. But there's dakhan. What is it, dakhan? Just like the smoke, okay? There's that contamination that starts getting into our society, generation after another generation, and that the previous salaf or the previous predecessors, they actually had a better understanding of Islam than the later. So if you truly wanted to study Islam, you want to remember that one, it wasn't that the Salaf or the predecessors, the Sahaba, for example, the Tabi'een, they had the information, they learned that ilm directly from the Prophet ﷺ or directly from the Sahaba or directly from the Tabi'een, and they also practiced the discipline of it better. The discipline of it gave them that inspiration to see beyond in how we take that intuition, or how we let that the combination of these two inspirations, or the revelation along with the practice, with the discipline, actually develop an inspiration right there to help them see through the lens that is beyond the ilm itself, but that takes those two categories of ilm and discipline to actually have a better relationship of what they need to practice as an intuition type of thing, as basically from the lens of Quran, Sunnah, or the lens of that risala, along with the lens of discipline, in order to see as through these two lenses and be able to see the legal maxims and to see ahead of all of what people are practicing and actually see the inspiration, the legal maxim, the purpose of the text itself and where it wants to take us. Where does the text want to take me to? And that's very important to keep in mind, that certainly the older generations actually had a better understanding and less contaminations than the later generations. The generations that we are right now living with, they're basically getting further influence and further fitna from, whether you want to call it feminism, you want to call it postmodernism, liberalism, the list goes on, and then many times without them realizing, actually using that area of vision and that area and that angle of interpretation to interpret the religion. And this is problematic, because what you're supposed to be doing is that you're supposed to go back to Risalat Rabbil Alameen. You're supposed to go back to the actual Risala and what is it saying, not reinterpreting or making what, in postmodernism, they would call it the death of the author, and not coming in and killing the author. In other words, eliminating the author and the influence, or at least the author and basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the one that revealed the Quran and what he is saying within the text, and then using a different interpretation because the person probably feels more comfortable to bring about a quote unquote modern interpretation. And what they usually mean by modern, they usually mean by that as Western, liberal interpretation. And certainly that carries within it the impression, and carries within it the connotation, and carries within it the inference that the West is basically superior, the liberal is superior, and that what we're supposed to be doing is trying to match their superiority, and what within that within that whole idea, it basically carries within it that Islam is inferior. And that this is the 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 key problem within a lot of the newer generation of Muslims is that they are coming with the premise that the West is superior, that the liberal society is superior, and that Muslims are supposed to somehow evolve around the superiority of this new quote unquote civilization, and that in order to actually match the superior society, that we have to either reinterpret the religion or reinterpret ethics, or perhaps even eliminate it completely from our life. And that's what's happening to a lot of the younger generation. When they come across the text, they're confused. Should they leave the religion entirely and now embrace the superior, quote unquote, society, the Western society, the postmodern society with all its cultures? Or should they eliminate? Well, that's the first option. Should they eliminate and basically consider themselves that they're not going to be following Islam in order to match and feel that they are basically at a higher level than the society that they probably consider themselves genetically, or at least within the society that they belong to? What happened? And how do we understand this? Or should they do option two, which is reinterpret the religion, and that way they can feel somewhat confident about, yes, their religion, and at the same time be confident that they can be Western as well, liberal as well, and reinterpret their religion to give it a new presentation. And basically, they won't have to lose either or. They won't have to lose their, at least, culture, because, of course, they would appear probably coming from a different descent, brown descent, Pakistani descent, Arabic descent, Ethiopian, whatever it is. And that way they can, well, they're not going to match entirely. So they can, mix and match and bring about a new combination. So, oh, just give me a second. All right. All right, let's continue right there. أبلغكم رسالات ربي وأنصح لكم وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. And I would, وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون, and I know from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what you do not know. I want you to look at this one. أعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. And what does that mean? That is he speaking about in terms of legislation itself? Or is he speaking about أعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون in terms of what is coming up? What is coming up, perhaps either the punishment that may be coming to them, or is it that أعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون in terms of the details of Judgment Day? What exactly was he referring to? That the details, all of that can actually be a possible thing. But within the context, we can see that when he said, أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي أَنصَحُ لَكُمْ وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, that this basically would let us know that the prophets and messengers, the information that they would be getting is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the information that they are getting is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not in a personal intuition. It wasn't a personal intuition, but was an inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you could see, let's say, he said, min Rabbil Alameen. رسالة ربي أعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. So you could see within every single text, within every single reference, within every single quote that he was saying, he was always referring it and basically making sure that he presents the emphasis that this is not about me, but this is about Allah Almighty. This is about the presentation of that revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had asked me to deliver. And this presentation is about worshiping Allah Almighty and of something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not necessarily given you all the information about, but there's some information that you need to know that basically relates to the purpose of your existence, that relates to the why you were created, where are you heading, what are you supposed to be worshiping, and all those details. He basically was telling them, there's a lot more information, but certainly they were not ready to hear that. That's why they فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا, and that's why اسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ وَأَصَرُّوا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. That's why they were basically covering their ears. They were basically putting things in their fingers in their ears to make sure that they're not going to be hearing anything, because they did not even want to hear the message and nothing within the message, because they recognized that the message itself they could not refute. So they started doing what is called an ad hominem and attacking him personally and accusing him of just being deviant by not embracing their way of life in at least worship or in their lifestyle. So they considered that that was enough evidence to prove that this person is basically not coming with something that is good. And this is very important, especially with the younger generation. Alhamdulillah, Gaza definitely proved and exposed a lot of the different contradictions, and certainly a lot of the different things that perhaps the Western society was presenting itself as, as the one that is pro human rights, pro women rights, pro all of that. But then, of course, with Gaza, with the Epstein files, a lot had been exposed. But I think the Muslims need to do a stronger, emphasis on exposing the discrepancies, the contradictions, and certainly the uh, the truth of all what is behind all that rhetoric that is nothing but empty of all the different claims that it wants to present itself in. That it is empty of caring about people. It is empty of caring about women. It is empty of being merciful. It is empty of being people that care about anything in humanity, and that they are definitely empty of all of that and are only after their own interests, and after even wanting to just expand their own wealth and expand basically their power within the society. And all of that is for none other but shaitan Baal. Okay, let's continue right there. أَوَعَجِبْتُمْ أَنْ جَاءَكُمْ ذِكْرٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ على رجل منكم لينذركم ولتتقوا ولعلكم ترحمون. Let's look into this one. We need to find a couple things here. أَوَعَجِبْتُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say what they actually had said. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just gave us the response. What is the response that Prophet Nuh alayhi salam laid out? Do you find it astonishing that a reminder should come to you from your Lord through one of your own, warning you, so you may beware and perhaps be shown mercy? Let's see another one. Then you wonder that there has come to you a reminder from your Lord through a man from among you. Definitely, this is better than Khattab's translation. That he may warn you, that you may fear Allah, so you might receive mercy. Absolutely better translation. Let's see this one. Do you wonder that there has come to you a reminder from your Lord through a man from amongst you, that he may warn you, so that you may fear Allah and that you may receive his mercy? Definitely prefer it over Sahih International. Do you wonder that admonition should come to you from your Lord through a man from amongst yourselves, that he may warn you, that you may avoid evil and that mercy may be shown unto you? Wait, that you may avoid evil. لينذركم. How did you get that you may avoid evil and that mercy be shown to you? وَلِتَتَّقُوا, and avoid evil for taqwa. He may warn you for yunzirakum, and mercy be shown to you, this one. And that, what did they use here? That he may warn you so that you may fear Allah and that you receive his mercy. I think this one definitely, even though he gave some certain details here, I like it. Okay, let's see this one. Definitely this one. Definitely this one. We're going to see further. Let's see. Let's do the translation to understand why that one is the translation I had chosen. So let's see right there. Okay, what does it say? أَوَعَجِبْتُمْ. Are you astonished? Are you astonished, or do you find it strange? So أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي, and then أَوَعَجِبْتُمْ. So it didn't actually say, in between these sentences, it didn't say any quote of what they said, but it just presented Prophet Nuh alayhi salam's rebuttal against them. It didn't say, well, they said, it's strange that you come with this message, and why did you come with this message? Why are you against our society, etc.? But then what it presented is that أَوَعَجِبْتُمْ, just Prophet Nuh alayhi salam's response. And therefore the inference is they were saying that it was a surprise, that they were surprised, that they were astonished, that they were confused as to why Allah would even send a messenger. But the ayah basically lets us know the rebuttal right away and says, are you astonished that a man, or أَنْ جَاءَكُمْ ذِكْرٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ, that you received, so this was جَاءَكُمْ, it can come to you, ذِكْرٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. What is a dhikr? A dhikr can be a reminder. A dhikr can be something that is basically told orally. And a dhikr could also be something that is repeated. Okay, so is it all? Yes, certainly. It was a reminder because they already had it in their fitrah. How did they have it in their fitrah? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically said in the ayah وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ. Okay, so it's within their fitrah, so they already had sensed it. Number two, that dhikr is basically something, أُبَلِّغُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي, here it is. It was actually something that he had mentioned, and he definitely said it orally, a clear statement. And it was also repeated, أَنْصَحُ لَكُمْ. He was repeating it on and on and on. And he, as in Surah Nuh, he was repeating the message, letting them know, لَكِنِّي رَسُولٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, and he was repeating that same word. Okay, and it was مِّن رَبِّكُمْ again. It wasn't centered around him. It was centered around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, عَلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنكُمْ. It was from a man from amongst you. Okay, hold on. So where is that place of astonishment in? Were they astonished, or were they confused? At least, they're confusing. They were confused about what? That any dhikr would come, or that it would come from Allah, or that it would come from a man and not perhaps maybe anything that is supernatural. Those are three different possibilities. Is it that there's some information to be sent from God and from a man? Or is it also لينذركم, to give you that warning? Or is it that, oh, that they were supposed to be living a certain discipline and that there is a possibility of getting included in the mercy? So what did they actually object to? What were they confused about? Where's that area of confusion? You can say all, or you can say one of these. One, that there was any message that was sent, that there is God Almighty, that they're supposed to be turning to worshiping Him alone. Three, that it was basically a man that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had anointed to and chosen to basically deliver the message, and that it was basically chosen to be him and not one of their chieftains. And three, or that's four, that it was to warn them that there is a purpose of life and that there's judgment day and that they have to live a certain level of discipline and that they're basically going to be held accountable and that this is an opportunity to basically be included in the mercy and the salvation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of those were things that they basically had expressed right there that they're confused about, that they couldn't believe, that they were basically wondering how does that even all work out? How would we bring about such an idea, nor how do we embrace it? How do we understand it? Where did that all come from, etc.? And certainly, what did they believe is the question. What did they believe in all about this? So they basically did not believe that there is any revelation that was sent. What did they believe in terms of God? Did they believe in God? Yes, certainly they believed in God, but they worshipped Wad, Suwa, Yaghuth, and Ya'uq and Nasra. So they worshipped a different set of deities that they considered that those resembled God. And that presentation was actually something that, according to certain references, that the way that they made these idols, they were idols of good people in the beginning. And then these good people, they made these monuments to represent them. And then it was something that would inspire them to do good or inspire them to what they considered as good, at least. And then it turned with time from having these idols as something that is inspirational to later being something that they would turn to in worship. And later on, it became that contains the spirit of God. All right. That's the same idea that even the pagan Arab, that's the same idea that they basically embraced. So they considered that same thing. They said, وَمَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُونَا إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. They said, we only worship these items or these idols basically to get us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that it is to bring an inspiration to us. It's to inspire us, to give us that relationship, and then from that they would consider that it is to help us basically have that relationship with God by considering the spirit that lies within them. Okay, did they actually, well, with that رجل منكم, did they also have a problem with, did the Arab at least have a problem with the رجل منكم? Yes, they considered that why weren't certain other chieftains chosen? And they said, if only, just like in Surah Al-Zukhruf, if only this was revealed on one of the magnificent, the chieftains. Why a random man like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what they considered. لولا أنزل هذا القرآن على رجل من القريتين عظيم. Is that the ayah? Okay. لينذركم. The other part, لينذركم, they didn't believe that there was anything behind life. They considered that worshiping the idols in itself was going to be bringing in some salvation. And that this salvation, think of it as a lucky charm, okay? Or something that would bring in good luck, bring in salvation, bring in some good things in life, and that they would consider that worshiping the idols was just supposed to bring them that, but then there's nothing after life. They did not consider that there was anything after life and that this life was it. They just die and that's basically the end of life and the end of meaning. There was no resurrection. There was none of that. There was nothing. And in the afterlife, in other words, it's a form of atheism. I want you to look at this one because in the definition of atheism, a means to cancel out believing in God. But in Islam, anybody that cancels out tawheed in Islam, the word atheism is more comprehensive than canceling out God or not believing in God. So an atheistic religion would be to cancel out the relationship between God and our purpose of life, or God and creation, God and basically his force and his power in life. So atheism in Islam is a lot more comprehensive than not believing in God. But atheism in God actually includes considering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala either, one, that he does not have maqalidu samawati wal ard, does not have the power over the heavens and the earth and creation, and two, that atheism also means that the person is not worshiping God, but is worshiping perhaps something else that they would consider is presenting God, whether we're talking about an idol or whether we're speaking about other religions that they end up basically worshiping just perhaps other different subjects of matter. So when you're looking at atheism, they were in a way, according to the comprehensive definition of atheism in Islam, they were more of an atheistic religion, although it's pagan. So it's more of an atheistic religion because they did not regard that there was an afterlife or there was a time of resurrection or there was Yawm al-Qiyamah or there was anything behind life or there was any purpose, and they considered that this is it, that what you see is all it. What you see, it's just matter in motion. We just live and we just die, and that's basically it. And whatever they might worship or they might turn to is just to bring in some level of peace that, hey, I'm going to be fine as long as I'm turning to this idol or turning to this mean of success. And I want you to look at this one, mean of success. So whether, yes, I've got a degree, my degree should actually give me a certain level of success, or perhaps maybe my job should give me a guarantee, for example, rizq, etc. That's another form of atheism if we were to just live it, that, rizq is coming from the job, and that the degree is to guarantee a job, guarantee success, and guarantee in this life. So that's a form of living an atheistic culture. If we are to live that rizq comes from degree, live or job, getting a job, that's what success is. That's an atheistic culture. A Muslim lives that success is not necessarily through a degree, is not necessarily through getting a job. Certainly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. Their, their action, their investment, yes, it will be scrutinized, but at the end of the day, is that it's not what level you reach, but it's what you invest that will be that area of accountability. It's not what degree you got. It's not what businesses and how many businesses you managed to open, but it's what amount of investment, the amount of ikhlas that you basically invested in is what is going to be judged. That's the area of accountability. Just to say, don't worry about the results. The results, those are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You just put in the effort and make sure that that effort is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for a mu'min, living the concept of tawheed is understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to invest in certain amal, invest in certain action, and that the result is not my responsibility, or at least is not going to be that area of where I'm going to be held accountable for. The result, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, result of success, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's going to put in basically the success or not. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. You put in that investment and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide it. You do your homework in raising your children, putting them in Quran classes, giving them drus, talking to them, mentoring them, all of that. Good job. Keep going. This is that sa'i that you need to do. Now, is the child going to embrace guidance? Did they choose to embrace it? Did they not choose to embrace it? Certainly, we would hope that they would choose to embrace guidance. Certainly, this is a bushra that alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given us, our children, the guidance, etc. Certainly, this is a good thing. But will you be held accountable if your son chooses otherwise or your daughter chooses otherwise after all the effort that you had put in? You won't be held accountable, but they will be the ones to be held accountable. And you will be basically rewarded for the effort that you had invested. Same thing if you were to talk about maybe, hey, you did your homework, you tried to get a job, you tried to study, you tried to do all of that, but then you lost your job. Keep going. Keep searching for another job. Don't stop. You have to, and that's what أَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be overseeing and judging you based on his sa'i. What is his sa'i? His sa'i is basically to put in the effort to walk, to put in the effort to probably act in a certain way, invest in something. That's his sa'i. That's his sa'i. So putting that within this context, we would basically say that the people of Qawm Nuh, certainly Prophet Nuh alayhi salam was letting them know that there was dhikrum min rabbikum. That's the first thing that you want to do in da'wah, is that let people know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent a message. What is that message? And that you are also included in that message, that you're also applying it. This isn't somehow me coming in to be authoritative, but this is something that I too would have to apply. لِيُنذِرَكُمْ, to warn you. In other words, you live within your mind, within your heart, within your ruh, that this is basically to be invested on Judgment Day, and you live between al-khawf wa raja. You live between two wings, basically the wing of hope and fear. You fear that on Judgment Day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds you accountable. You fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is overseeing what you are doing. And at the same time, وَلِتَتَّقُوا. What is it, taqwa? Taqwa is living that consistency of commitment on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not enough. You could be on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but living the taqwa is to make sure you're putting in that consistency till the time of لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. So throughout our life, we're living as feeling that there is something that I will one day be living to witness on Judgment Day. So I present thabat, that determination, that steadfastness throughout life, and in hope that I will be included in Rahmah on Judgment Day. In Rahmah on Judgment Day. So what does that mean? لِيُنذِرَكُمْ is the mindset that you want to maintain all the time, that I'm going to be meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is a day that I will be put to death, and that would be the end of my amal, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will resurrect me. That's al-inzar. How do I live it? Well, you move on with putting in that consistency, that steadfastness, in order later on Judgment Day to be included, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, to be included in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah, to be included in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Okay, now putting all these pieces together, we basically, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will include us in لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, and we will continue tomorrow. We've got some work to do. We're still not done, okay? Even with this, we're still not done because we've got some Tafseer Al-Qurtubi to go over each and every single word. So we're, inshallah, going to be continuing tomorrow. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. Nobody has any questions? Okay, what I'll do is